Hi there. My name is Pam Simpson, and I'm an AI Business Information Security Officer here at TD Bank, where I lead security governance for generative AI initiatives and contribute to multiple industry working groups exploring AI's impact on the financial sector. Prior to this, I worked within the threat intelligence field here at TD, as well as at BMO, and also had a focus on ransomware and nation-state actors. I'm currently serving on the steering committee for the FSISAC AI Risk Working Group and an active member of many other industry working groups from which I will be able to share some of the insights on this keynote. I'm really excited to speak with you all today. Thank you to the CSA for having me, and I'm excited to dive in. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all about an emerging role within the AI industry, which is AI Business Information Security Officers. Now, as I mentioned, I'm part of the financial industry, so a lot of this presentation is going to be focused on some of the initiatives that we're taking on within the financial industry, aligning that to the BISO role. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit to what a BISO is, a traditional BISO, and then what an AI BISO is and how this is really evolving in the space. I'm going to talk about some of the strategy that it takes to implement and keep speed with innovation as the business progresses and uses AI, and the BISO working towards the security controls and frameworks to ensure that we're securing these AI initiatives as they are brought into the organization. I'm going to touch a little bit on the AI threat landscape to give some idea of where we're seeing some more novel threats and expedited threats, and how that translates then into how we can use AI within the organization in our security operations to ensure that we are providing the most security for these companies, as well as against all of these external threat actors and innovative attacks. Finally, I'm going to talk about the AI governance track, a little bit about the life cycle, and what BISOs should be considering now in their role for the future of AI risk, and questions to consider if you're thinking about making that transition into the AI BISO role. So I'm going to start off first. What is a BISO? What is a Business Information Security Officer? And they're really an important part of the organization's cybersecurity function. So a BISO will liaison between the cybersecurity practitioners and the business. So when we're introducing new initiatives, or if we're evaluating any sort of cybersecurity risks that may be emerging, the BISO should be aware of these and should be working with the business to ensure that we're instilling controls or some sort of risk framework in place to ward against these threats. So a BISO should have two domains of knowledge, and that should really be an alignment to the business, the processes, the standards, the policies, and they should have a good foundation within the cybersecurity space, which is where that information security officer lens comes in. Their responsibilities are really going to be consulting on security controls, collaborating on compliance and training, supporting third-party risk management, and staying abreast of multiple technologies, risks, and policies. So that leads us to, what is an AI BISO? An AI BISO, it's a fairly new idea. It's a fairly new concept. And I understand that industries are starting to pick this up as a role that can bridge that gap between AI, security, and the business. So traditionally, we were just kind of looking at that bridge between the business and cybersecurity. We're now adding that layer of AI. And currently, and I speak more for the financial sector, we're at an inflection point where AI is offering immense amount of opportunity for this sector, and organizations are continually having to recalibrate their course of action on security to ensure that we are providing the utmost security for all of the AI initiatives that the business wants to enable. So companies want to ensure they're achieving speed and scale and velocity by building a comprehensive multidisciplinary program to enable AI throughout the business. And part of that program is the AI BISO role. So for security personnel, this includes building security as an enabler. So what does that mean? Well, there's sort of a three-pronged approach to this. And I'm going to keep this at a bit more of a high level, but this really does come from those industry discussions about how do we best situate the business and set them up for success while keeping pace with security. So the first one is AI defense. Threat actors have harnessed AI to evolve their operations and increase the volume and scale of existing attacks, such as phishing, malware, zero-day vulnerabilities, etc. And I'm going to speak a little bit more to that later. But when we determine an existing or new priority area, we have to upgrade our defenses to match the threat, even if it is scaled, even if they are effectively and efficiently targeting various financial organizations. We need to ensure we're bringing those same capabilities to our defense so that we can defend the organization against these emerging threats. And that means continuously being abreast of what is new and what is the newest controls out there that we can leverage to defend against these attacks. So that brings us to AI Secures. AI Secures isn't necessarily about defending against those external threat partners. It's having an awareness on security controls that need to be implemented for the innovative initiatives that the business is taking on. So innovation and security must scale together. And that means securing new technologies with traditional controls and new AI measures. If the goal is to onboard AI at scale, which I'm going to make an assumption that a lot of companies are moving towards that goal currently, then setting up foundational security processes and tools enables AI within the business and enables it to move through these security assessments, for safety and security and all the trustworthy characteristics to be implemented into prod in the business. And finally, governing AI. So how do we do this? And this is really the core of the BISO role. It is understanding where we have that existing coverage, where we have that existing technical controls to secure, these new AI initiatives, because we should leverage what is already in place and doing that gap assessment to identify what coverage don't we have. If we're looking at parameters, for instance, or if we're looking at fine tuning, if we're looking at what do we need to augment in our third-party assessment process to really understand and explain the AI that's coming into this organization. These are the components that are going to need to be prioritized from a governance standpoint because they're maybe not being covered by traditional security controls. And that's where an AI BISO comes in that change management aspect. So before we start looking at what controls we need to implement as a core responsibility of a BISO, we have to look at the AI threat landscape. And so this comes from collaborating with your threat intelligence teams, with your SOC, with your security personnel who are really looking at those new and emerging threats. And I'm going to highlight a few that are specific to the financial industry, but of course have implications broader for all critical infrastructure and potentially into other organizations as well. The first is broad and wide-ranging, which is social engineering. Criminals can conduct reconnaissance on an individual and craft custom emails, voices, fabricated images to prompt any sort of urgent response, and this can be done in minutes with the technology available now. These models are getting so good at scraping the open web. There are a number of threats on the deep and dark web that allow attackers to leverage AI technologies to bypass KYC controls, which is know your customer controls. And generally, KYC relies on validation, verification, and authentication. Think about when you're going to a branch and they ask you for a piece of ID to validate that it's you so that you can open a bank account. With the rise of digital banking, a lot of threat actors are taking advantage of the fact that you can now craft almost synonymous government pieces of ID in minutes with generative AI and use those to try and bypass controls set at the organizational level. Additionally, there are some controls that have come out to defeat this, including liveness detection, which is, where you would be asked to spin around in your chair or do something on camera to prove that you're not a deep fake, that it's really you. And threat actors are actually going through these processes and creating deep fakes that would pass liveness detection. So as you can see, that the AI that is available is catapulting us into the space of innovation for businesses, but it is also accelerating threat actors to be able to bypass these traditional controls that could have very harmful effects on not only organizations, but the trust and security and safety of customers. Next, we'll look at vulnerabilities. The primary one that I want to talk about here is really jailbreaking a model, but also onboarding specific models that may have a backdoor or an unauthenticated database that's accessible outside the organization that would lead to data exfiltration. Jailbroken models like the two I know are Fraud GPT and Worm GPT, among others, they're used by criminals. They've just removed the safety guardrails. But jailbreaking a model could also apply internally to employees who now have this technology who want to be able to do more with it, and they try and jailbreak it in an attempt to get the model to do things that wouldn't be within the organization's risk tolerance. The example of onboarding models with a backdoor actually kind of goes into that supply chain compromise, which is the final risk I'm really going to touch on. And that's bringing in these unsecured AI models. And when I talked about securing AI in the organization, this is really a job for, the BISO, the risk partners, threat intelligence, your security engineers to determine how do you securely onboard models. Your developers are going to want to experiment. That's in their nature. It's new and incredibly powerful technology, but we have to do it in a safe and secure way. So what are some of the examples that we can use AI in security operations? The BISO role alongside these more innovative lines of business who are working on the development and build of these AI initiatives and models and applications is really there to guide the security within them. However, we also need to use AI to defend against these external threats. So it's twofold. And I'm going to start with defending against these external threats. So first is AI red teaming. AI red teaming has emerged as a way to proactively simulate adversarial attacks on AI systems to identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses before they can be exploited in the real world. And this is part of security testing, which is extremely important in generative AI developments just due to the unpredictable nature of the output. So AI red teaming has emerged throughout the industry as something that is being used to at scale test these AI models that are incredibly powerful. As I mentioned before, threat actors are trying to bypass those authentication controls. So enhanced anti-money laundering and fraud detection with expedited analysis and assessment of processes that go beyond traditional machine learning are being used within the financial industry to identify hidden patterns and transactions, hoping that this can be leveraged by other organizations and other industries against fraud, against spoofing, against any sort of type of malicious behavior. When we can start to really use AI to our advantage to understand those patterns, security analysts can really start to do deep dives on those anomalous patterns. So that also lends into sort of SIM integration, monitoring, logging. This is a unique consideration for the traditional evolution of logging and monitoring, which is introducing those AI safety layers. And this is something that NIST has in their framework when they talk about the trustworthiness principles. Creating controls so that, we're able to analyze sort of external attacks that are coming into the organization or individuals within the organization that are using these tools and adding a safety layer to them so that we can identify, is it harmful behavior? Is it malicious? What is the threat? Is there misuse or non-permissible behavior occurring? So it's really inside and outside. It's protecting against the activities that's coming against the organization, but also an analysis of the activity within your organization. And consideration should be given to the short, medium, and long-term evolution for how this will be fine-tuned in the future. And finally, synthetic voice and deepfake detection. This is big in the financial industry, as I mentioned, because there's huge potential for fraud detection, especially with call centers. So these are just some of the ways that, an AI BISO can help enable security operations to defend against those external attacks, which is just one pillar of that portfolio. The next pillar is really enabling the business by securing AI initiatives, because the message from the top is incredibly clear. Mature the organization to embed AI, leading to increased efficiency and achieving an innovative operational state. And this message must be supported by robust security controls, whether existing or new. So the first consideration will be looking at your organization's risk appetite and charting a path for different models, their intended purpose, and then how do we enable the security on those models that we're planning to deploy. So just for a couple from the conversations that I've had that seem to be the most popular right now, knowledge management AI, knowledge management RAG applications introduced to manage specific data that can be retrieved from if you're in a specific line of business, like let's say you're in HR, you can say we have our own AI model, which can bring up policies, procedures, and standards that are relevant to questions that I ask. This is really low risk, high reward use cases that create efficiencies within the organization. This can scale all the way to agentic models for customers. Now, obviously, this is kind of new and emerging space, and I kind of will touch on agentic, especially in the governance aspect, but that's very different than a knowledge management AI. A customer-facing agentic model would entail a lot more oversight. You would identify a lot more risk just because of the more unpredictable nature, potentially, of the agents, the memory aspects, as well as the fact that you are now going to be having it interact with customers. So how you secure these AI initiatives is going to look very different from a security perspective. And as a BISO, delineating between those two and being able that you're aware of what controls are necessary and setting those requirements is really the first step. So once the organization has an idea of their risk tolerance, we want to start with the foundations. And one way to do this is to consider AI safety layers. And I've kind of mentioned those before. But this is really breaking down those models and ensuring that at every operational layer, you're instilling controls, when we're looking at the fine tuning, when we're looking at data provenance, when we are, doing post deployment, is there a way to capture that user activity, capture that monitoring and logging? Can we identify intellectual property laundering within the model? Are people trying to jailbreak the model? What training data is being used? Like, these considerations are vast, but breaking them into the various layers or the various components of related to the model helps you to sort of build out that standard and build out those requirements that are required to secure these initiatives. So a core concept that I'll note that spans across every trustworthiness principle is AI data management. And this is important because as an AI BISO, I said that you are a connection to the business, you're a connection to cybersecurity, and now you're a connection to AI. But this role doesn't just entail working within those through domains. It also entails working with your risk partners or your other lines of business, like compliance, like legal, like data management and privacy, to ensure that we're capturing all the potential risks of data that is flowing through these AI models, because explainability and transparency do tend to be a bit of an issue at some points, especially with third-party models. There's a bit of a black box nature there. So bringing in these partners to opine on the potential risks will help create a clear path forward for what is acceptable and unacceptable in the organization, which can be enforced by the BISO role. I do want to touch a little bit on shadow AI because it is a big topic. And it was something that actually we'd spoken a bit about on a panel with the CSA that Troj AI had put together. And everyone, I think, agreed in that panel that the best way to manage shadow AI currently is to create a pathway, a golden pathway to good, which is ensure that you are laying that foundation. And part of that foundation is having a secure process for onboarding models. When you have a secure process for onboarding models, you're able to provide individuals with the opportunity to pursue the initiatives that they would like to pursue within the organization. And that's important because then they won't be going out to download that software on their own. So establishing that process, it creates a considerable amount of trust between the employees and between the security department, and will allow people to start experimenting without going off on their own and then being caught later for having unauthorized applications. Training and awareness is always paramount. And from what I've seen and from what I've had discussions on with my peers in the industry is a couple of tracks for this. we can look at training for security personnel. They have a foundation, a basis already for what secure and good looks like. So adding in that AI component is really saying, here's what's different about this technology, and here are some of the considerations for security beyond what you already know. This really helps to create security champions across the organization, because you're not starting from zero, you're starting with their foundational knowledge and then amending onto it that AI specific language. And I'll give some guidance in a little bit about, maybe that gap analysis that occurs. The second is managing the human. A huge component of AI is individuals just may not be as familiar with this technology as individuals in the security space, individuals in the tech space. So in organizations where you have things like personal banking, that training has to be tailored from, individuals who may have never used AI all the way to people who may use AI in their personal lives every single day, but just need guidance on how to use it within an organization, being really clear on what those permissible and non-permissible uses are, being exceptionally clear on what data should be used within these models. These are all things that may differ from that other training you provide to your security personnel. And as an AI BISO, when you work between those two worlds, understanding the training that each might need becomes really important, because you want to be able to speak the same language, whether you're going to the business or if you're going to your security personnel or if you're going to your executives. All right, so now I'm going to get into the AI governance lifecycle. This is my favorite part. So the AI governance lifecycle, this is really the bread and butter of the BISO role. And it follows about 5 to 6 steps, and they're iterative. You might do them again and again. But when you're looking to set up sort of that AI BISO role and that AI governance lifecycle, first and foremost, I would suggest going out, looking at the frameworks available. There's many. You can look at NIST, you can look at MITRE, you can look at OWASP, the ISO 42001, you can look at Maestro framework for agentic, you can look at OWASP again for agentic threats, but look at those frameworks and look at what technical controls you already have in place and do that mapping. That is probably where most of my learning came from. Understanding those frameworks, doing the mapping, seeing what was left, and then building upon it. From there, you can prioritize, you can create foundational security capabilities because you understand where your gaps are. You can understand where you have very, very strong coverage. You can understand where you may need to bolster coverage, and you may have areas where you don't have coverage because this is a new technology and we need to scale along with it. So once you have that framework, then you can really look to prioritize and see where the business wants to invest to create the most foundational security capabilities to enable the most initiatives. Creating bespoke security capabilities for each initiative, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of resources, and then once you're done, it's hard to reuse those security capabilities for another project. But ensuring that you're introducing security controls that apply to multiple initiatives will help scale the business in terms of their AI security. Once you've gone through this process, look at your risk-based assessments and ensure that when you are looking at them, that you might be augmenting them, may need to implement a policy, but ensure that we are not overdoing it on the risk assessments, because AI, and especially agentic AI, can look like a very scary thing down the line. But when we think about risk in an organization, we can't stop innovation, but rather we have to manage the security, and we have to put our guardrails in and say, as the security personnel, here is what would be recommended in terms of adding on to or in addition to this risk-based assessment, so that we're accurately capturing the risk and we can accurately relay that to the partners we need to relay it to. And in this is creating a future-proof policy. And that's really difficult to do. It's something we've talked extensively about within the financial sector, and it's how do you introduce these concepts that might not even be really into your governance to ensure that you're already providing security for them. It is difficult, but it is necessary. We've seen how fast the shift has been over the past year, and we can anticipate more quick shifts in the next coming years. So really future-proofing, staying on top of those frameworks and guidance is going to be really important for what good looks like in terms of security. And next, you really have to formally document everything and train individuals on it, which I had touched about. Once you have that formal documentation in your processes, in your policies, and however you want to approach integrating AI into the organization, ensure that we're training people, ensure that we're bringing them to that awareness and they're aligned with what the organizational pathway is for AI. So I hope that this was helpful. I've provided some more granular examples, I think some more overarching examples of sort of what an AI BISO does. I think that we need more individuals in the space. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to CSA or myself. Happy to chat. But overall, I'm excited to see what the future of AI security is and the multitude of people that are contributing to it. So thank you so much.